The high desert wind carries whispers of a man who shouldn't exist. They call him the Wraith of Prosperity Creek, a ghost who died in fire and blood, now back to haunt the man who took everything from him. He moves in the dust and the shadow, a rumor fueled by fear. But to Eliza Vance, a woman trapped under the thumb of the same tyrant, the rumors aren't enough. She's about to discover that the ghost is a man of flesh and bone, covered in the scars of a past that is very much alive. And when she touches those scars, she'll ignite a reckoning that will either save their town or burn it to the ground. The dust in Prosperity Creek had a taste. It was a fine, gritty powder that coated the tongue and settled in the lungs, a constant reminder that the land was dying. The Gila River, which had once been the town's lifeblood, was now just a muddy trickle thanks to the series of legal dams Bartholomew Craven had built upstream to water his vast cattle empire. The town was a hostage, and the ransom was their land. Eliza Vance knew the taste of that dust better than anyone. She stood behind the counter of Vance's Mercantile and Hardware, a store that had once been the bustling heart of the county. Now she spent most days swatting flies and staring at the empty boardwalk through the grimy glass. The store was all she had left of her father, and she was losing it just like everyone else was losing everything. Bartholomew Craven was a man who owned the horizon. He'd arrived 5 years ago, with a fat wallet and a smile that never reached his eyes. He'd bought the bank, the saloon, and half the ranches in the valley. Those who didn't sell found their wells mysteriously running dry or their fences cut. Craven, it was said, didn't just buy land, he consumed it. Today, 2 of his men were in the Mercantile, not to buy, but to collect. "Miss Vance," said Lyle, a broad-shouldered man with a week's worth of stubble and mean, squinting eyes. He leaned on the counter, his weight making the old wood groan. "The boss is getting impatient. This is the 3rd time we've come by for the loan payment." "I told you, Lyle, I don't have it," Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. Her hands were clenched below the counter. "Sales are down. The whole town is broke, thanks to your boss." "That ain't our problem." The second man, younger but with the same cold emptiness, idly spun a tin of beans on the shelf. "Mr. Craven sees this store as a prime location, right on the main street. He'd be willing to forgive the debt in exchange for the deed. It's not for sale." Lyle sighed, a theatrical sound. "Don't make this difficult, Eliza. We all know you're alone. Your papa's gone. There's no one to protect this place." He reached across the counter and grabbed a burlap sack of flour. "We'll just take this as a down payment." "Put that back," Eliza snapped, stepping out from behind the counter. Lyle laughed. "Or what you'll hit me with a feather duster." He hefted the bag onto his shoulder. As he turned, he deliberately knocked a high shelf. Jars of preserved peaches, her mother's recipe, crashed to the floor in a symphony of shattering glass and sticky syrup. Eliza cried out, dropping to her knees. It wasn't just the mess, it was the violation. The last tangible piece of her mother destroyed for sport. "You clean that up?" Lyle sneered. "We'll be back Friday. Have the deed or the money, or we'll board this place up ourselves." They left their laughter echoing in the empty street. Eliza knelt in the sugary glass, hot, silent tears, tracing paths through the dust on her cheeks. She was well and truly alone. That night the whispers started. The townspeople huddled in the Last Chance saloon, owned by Craven, of course, spoke in low tones. They talked about the Wraith. "Heard he was seen up near Craven's north pasture." Old man Hemlock, the blacksmith, muttered into his beer. "2 guards just gone. Vanished." "It's Shaw," another man whispered, looking over his shoulder. "Caleb Shaw. He's come back." The name hung in the air like smoke. Caleb Shaw had been the only man to ever stand up to Craven. He'd owned the Running Sea Ranch, the one patch of land Craven couldn't buy. Shaw was a decorated veteran of the war, a sharp shooter and a fair man. He and Craven had been partners briefly until Craven showed his true colors. 5 years ago, the Running Sea had burned to the ground. They said Shaw and his new wife Sarah were trapped inside. When the marshal paid by Craven, everyone knew, finally rode out, all they found were charred bones. Craven had expressed his deepest regrets, and within a month had absorbed the Running Sea into his own massive holdings. But the rumors had started 6 months ago. A supply wagon of Craven's found with its wheels removed and its cargo of barbed wire dumped in a ravine. A prize bull found painted bright yellow, and then the disappearances. Craven's men, always the cruelest ones, would be found miles from their posts, tied up, their guns missing, and a single white hawk feather left on their chest. They called him the Wraith, a ghost of vengeance. Eliza, cleaning her ruined floor, dismissed it. It was a campfire story, a desperate fantasy. Ghosts didn't exist. There was only the dust, the debt, and the looming deadline of Friday. She worked late patching the floorboard where the jars had broken. The moon was high when she finally bolted the heavy front door. She lived in the small apartment above the store. Exhausted, she fell into her bed, the smell of peaches still clinging to her clothes. A noise woke her, a scraping sound from downstairs. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Lyle. He came back. She grabbed the heavy iron skillet from her stove, her only weapon. Barefoot, she crept to the landing. The mercantile was pitch black. A floorboard creaked. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Silence. Then a single soft thud on the counter, as if something had been set down. She held her breath, counting to 100. Nothing. She slowly descended the stairs, the skillet raised. The moon cut a silver slash across the room. The store was empty, but on the counter, gleaming in the moonlight, was a stack of double eagle gold coins. Next to it sat her father's old ledger, the one Lyle had taken, and on top of the ledger was a single perfect white hawk feather. She crept to the door. The bolt was still shot. The windows were locked. He had come and gone, like a ghost. 2 days later, on Friday, Lyle and his partner returned. They sauntered in, expecting tears and a quick surrender. Eliza stood behind the counter, her back straight. She counted out the exact amount of the loan payment coin by coin and pushed it across the counter. Lyle's jaw dropped. He stared at the gold. Where did you get this?" "I'm paying my debt," Eliza said, her voice cold. "And here is the payment for the broken jars. Now get out of my store." Lyle's face turned a shade of purple. He looked at the gold, then at her. He knew this money wasn't from sales. He knew somehow that he'd been beaten. He swept the coins into his bag. "This ain't over, Miss Vance," he spat. "The boss ain't gonna like this." "That," Eliza said, "is not my problem." As they left, she saw old man Hemlock across the street, watching. He slowly nodded, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Hope. That night, Lyle and his partner were set to guard Craven's primary dam, the one strangling the Gila River. They were never seen in Prosperity Creek again. The sheriff, reporting to a furious Craven, said the scene was strange. No blood, no bodies. Just 2 horses wandering loose, and on the dam's control wheel, tied with a leather thong, was a single white feather. Eliza held the feather she'd found on her counter, rubbing its soft edge. The Wraith wasn't a story. He was real, and for some reason he had decided to protect her. The protection of a ghost, Eliza discovered, was a double-edged sword. On one hand, A palpable fear had settled over Craven's men. They rode in threes now, not twos, and they gave the mercantile a wide berth. On the other hand, it had put a spotlight directly on her. Bartholomew Craven himself paid her a visit. He didn't come in, merely stopped his gleaming black buggy outside. He was a large man, dressed in a tailored suit that seemed out of place in the dusty town. He tipped his hat. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice a smooth, deep baritone. "I see you've come into some fortune. It's remarkable what one can find when one is motivated." "I paid my debt, Mr. Craven," Eliza said from her doorway. "So you did. So you did." His eyes, the color of a winter sky, scanned the front of her store. "But loyalty is a valuable commodity out here. It would be a shame if the town thought you were consorting with undesirables. Ghosts, even." He smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "This phantom of yours. He can't be everywhere at once. And you, my dear, are always here." He tipped his hat again and drove on, leaving the threat hanging in the air. He hadn't raised his voice, but the message was as clear as a gunshot. He believed she was in league with the Wraith, and he would use her as bait. Fear gnawed at her. She needed to get out of town just for a day to clear her head. She also needed supplies. Her father had maintained a small line shack high in the Dragoon foothills, a place he'd used for hunting. There were traps and dried goods stored there. With Craven's men watching her every move, she felt safer being self-sufficient. She saddled her mare Bess, telling no one where she was going. She rode west out of the dying valley and into the jagged, rust-colored mountains. The air grew thin and cold. The sky, a perfect blue, when she left, began to curdle. Dark, bruised clouds gathered on the peaks, and the wind picked up howling through the canyons. A norther, fast and violent, was blowing in. Before she was halfway to the shack, the world disappeared. A wall of dust and ice descended. Sleet, sharp as needles, stung her face. Bess whinnied, turning her back to the wind. Eliza was blinded, disoriented. She pulled her coat tight, but the cold was already seeping into her bones. She slid off the horse, huddling against its warmth, knowing she was in serious trouble. The temperature was plummeting. Just gotta find shelter," she muttered, her teeth chattering. She grabbed Bess's reins and tried to lead her, pushing against a wind that felt solid. She stumbled over a loose rock. A sharp, cracking pain shot up her leg. She cried out, falling to her knees. Her ankle, it was twisted badly, maybe broken. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the numbness. She was going to die here. She would freeze to death, and Craven wouldn't even have to lift a finger. She tried to stand, but the pain was blinding. She collapsed back against the rock, the sleet turning to thick, wet snow. Bess nudged her, frantic. "It's okay, girl. It's—" She couldn't finish. Her vision was blurring. A shape moved through the white curtain. It was tall, broad, and moving with an eerie silence. It wasn't a man on a horse. It was a man on foot. He was covered in a heavy fur-lined duster, the collar pulled high, and a low-brimmed hat obscuring his face. He looked more like a mountain than a man. He stopped a few feet from her. She could see no features, only a dark shadow where his face should be. "Please," she whispered. My ankle." The figure didn't speak. He knelt beside her. She saw a gloved hand reach out, impossibly gentle, and run along her leg. When he touched the ankle, she hissed in pain. He stood turned and let out a low, soft whistle. From out of the snow, a large black horse, as silent as its master, appeared. With one powerful, effortless motion, he lifted Eliza from the ground. She was too weak to fight, too cold to feel anything but a strange, floating relief. He placed her on his horse, then mounted behind her, his body a solid wall of heat, against her back. He wrapped one arm around her waist, holding her secure. He didn't speak a single word. He just nudged the horse forward, not back the way she came, but up deeper into the rocky hidden folds of the mountain. They rode for what felt like an hour, though she was drifting in and out of consciousness. The storm seemed to worsen, but the man moved with an uncanny certainty, as if he could see the path in the dark. Finally, they passed through a narrow split in the rock, so narrow she thought the horse wouldn't fit. It opened up into a small sheltered box canyon, protected on all sides by sheer cliffs. The wind was a dull roar here, not a scream. A cave was carved into the rock face, a low, dark opening. He dismounted, lifted her down, and carried her inside. The blackness was total, but she heard him moving. A scrape of flint and steel. A small spark, then a flame caught a prepared pile of tinder. A lantern was lit, and the cave filled with a soft golden glow. It wasn't a natural cave. It was an old, abandoned mine shaft, shored up with heavy timbers. It was dry and surprisingly warm. Blankets were piled in a corner, along with crates of supplies, a water barrel, and a small, efficient-looking stove. The man turned to her, and for the first time she saw him. Eliza gasped. He was a ghost. His hat was off. His hair was dark, streaked with grey at the temples. But his face, the left side of his face, was a tapestry of scars. A thick, puckered line ran from his temple across his cheekbone and disappeared into his beard. It was an old, terrible burn. Another paler scar cut through his eyebrow. He was, she realized, Caleb Shaw. He wasn't the handsome, smiling man from the old photographs in her father's desk. This man was gaunt, haunted. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue, held a pain so deep she felt it in her own chest. He was beautiful and terrifying all at once. He didn't acknowledge her shock. He moved with a quiet, grim purpose, retrieving a wooden box. "This will hurt," he said. His voice was a low rasp, gravelly from disuse. He knelt and with a sharp knife slit the fabric of her boot and trouser leg. Her ankle was already swollen and purple. His touch was firm, professional. "It's not broken," he said, his fingers probing the bone. "A bad sprain. You'll be off it for a week." He took a flask of whiskey and poured some on a clean rag, cleaning the scrape where she'd fallen. Then he poured a generous amount into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Drink." She did, coughing as the raw spirit burned her throat. It sent a wave of warmth through her. He began to wrap her ankle tightly with strips of clean canvas. She watched him work. His hands, too, were scarred. The knuckles were calloused, and a long white line ran across the back of his left hand. This was no ghost. This was a man who had been through hell and brought a piece of it back with him. You're him," she whispered. "Caleb Shaw." He finished the bandage and tied it off, not looking at her. "Shaw died in the fire." "Then who are you?" He stood and walked to the mouth of the cave, staring out at the blizzard. "Just a man who knows these mountains." "You saved me. In the store. The money. That was you. The men at the dam. That was you too." He turned his face, half in shadow. "Craven is a plague. I'm just lancing the boil. They call you a ghost," Eliza said, her voice soft. The whiskey and the warmth were making her bold. "A wraith. They say you're not real." He gave a short, bitter laugh that was more of a cough. "I'm real enough to bleed." She saw the dark stain on his sleeve near the shoulder, a small tear in the fabric. "You're hurt," she said, pointing. He glanced at it. "It's nothing. A graze. One of Craven's guards got lucky last night." Before he could stop her, she pushed herself up, wincing at the pain in her ankle. "Sit down." He looked at her, stunned by the command. "Sit. You saved me. Let me help you. It's the least I can do." He hesitated, then slowly, stiffly sat on a crate. She limped to the water barrel, took the whiskey-soaked rag and knelt before him. "Take off the duster," she said. He did, revealing the torn shirt beneath. The bullet had torn a groove through the muscle of his shoulder. It was bloody, but clean. She pressed the rag to it. He inhaled sharply, his whole body tensing at the sting of the alcohol. He didn't make a sound, but she saw the muscles in his jaw clench. She cleaned the wound, her touch as gentle as she could make it. He was so still, he barely seemed to be breathing. "Why?" she asked, her voice low. "Why help me? Why the town? Craven took everything from me," he rasped, staring at the cave wall. "My home, my wife, my life. I'm just taking it back, piece by piece, by scaring his men. Fear is a cleaner weapon than a bullet, most of the time." He looked at her, his blue eyes intense. "You shouldn't have been involved. The money, that was to get you out, to make you leave. Prosperity Creek is not safe for you. He knows you're my way in." "He threatened me," Eliza admitted. "He thinks I'm your partner." "Then you must leave," Caleb said, his voice flat. "Tonight, when the storm breaks, I'll take you to the next town." "No." His head snapped up. "No, I'm not running. It's my home, my father's store. It's all I have left." "Your father's store won't be worth much when you're dead." The words were harsh, but she heard the undercurrent of desperation in them. He was trying to protect her. This broken, scarred man was trying to protect her. She finished cleaning the wound. Her hand was near the scars on his face. He was so close. She could feel the heat radiating from him. He was all sharp angles and suppressed pain. Impulsively, she lifted her free hand, the one not holding the rag. She hesitated, her fingers trembling an inch from his cheek. He flinched his eyes, squeezing shut, bracing for a blow or a recoil of disgust. But she didn't recoil. She gently, softly laid her palm against the rough, scarred landscape of his face. His skin was warm. He was breathing fast and shallow. A shudder ran through his entire body. They called him a ghost of the West. She whispered, her thumb tracing the line of the burn. She touched his scars and said, "You're real enough for me." Caleb Shaw opened his eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, the ghost looked back at her with the eyes of a living man. The moment stretched, suspended in the howl of the storm. Caleb's stillness was absolute. He was like a wild animal, frozen, deciding between fight or flight. His skin was rough beneath her palm, the ridges of scar tissue, a stark contrast to the surprising softness of his beard. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean into the touch either. He simply endured it, his clear blue eyes fixed on hers, searching for the pity or revulsion he was so used to. He found neither. Eliza's gaze was steady, filled with a deep, aching compassion that was almost as painful as the wound on his shoulder. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "You shouldn't. Pity me." "It's not pity," Eliza said, her hand remaining. "It's recognition. I've been feeling like a ghost myself, rattling around in that empty store." She drew her hand back, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sorry." He shook his head, turning to stare back into the flames of the small stove. No one has touched my face. Since the fire," she finished for him. He nodded, a curt, sharp movement. He pulled his shirt back on, wincing as the fabric dragged over his injured shoulder. "The storm will hold for another day, maybe 2. You'll be safe here. I have food. I have to check my lines." "In this?" she asked, incredulous, gesturing to the white maelstrom visible at the cave's mouth. "Craven's men won't be moving. It's the only time I can." He stood, pulling on his heavy duster. He was all business again. The brief moment of vulnerability sealed away. "Caleb, wait." He paused, his back to her. "You said he took everything? Your wife? Sarah?" The name felt heavy on her tongue. I remember her. She came into the store once. She bought blue ribbons. She was beautiful, and so kind." Caleb's shoulders tensed, his hand gripping the timber support of the cave entrance, so hard his knuckles went white. For a long moment he said nothing. "Tell me," Eliza urged, her voice soft but insistent. "If you want me to leave, if you want me to understand why this town isn't safe, you have to tell me what really happened. The official story is that it was an accident." He let out a long, slow breath. The wind outside seemed to die down, as if the mountain itself was listening. "It wasn't an accident," he said, his voice flat and dead. "It was a message." He turned around, and the man who faced her was not the wounded protector from a moment ago. This was the Wraith. His eyes were chips of ice. "Craven and I built our ranches together. We were partners. My brawn, his money. But his money came with an appetite. He wanted the whole valley. I was content with my share. That was my sin. Contentment." He began to pace, his limp from an old leg injury more pronounced than she'd noticed. He started buying out the smallholders, using persuasion. I told him to stop. I told him our partnership was finished if he continued. He smiled, that damn smile of his, and said he'd take it under advisement. He brought in a man, a specialist, not just a gunman, but a professional, a man from back east, a former Pinkerton detective who'd been fired for being too brutal. "His name is Marcus Flint," Eliza gasped. "He's in town. Craven just hired him. He's cold. He came into the store just looking, didn't say a word. It was terrifying." Caleb's face darkened. "Flint is here now. For about a week. Then it's worse than I thought." He ran a hand over his scarred face. "Craven is preparing for a war, or to finish one." He continued, "Flint was the one who did the persuading. He was clever. No bodies, just problems. A barn fire here. A tainted well there. I confronted Craven. I told him I was riding to Prescott to file a complaint with the territorial marshal. I was going to expose him." He stopped pacing and looked at Eliza. "That night, Sarah and we were celebrating. We were expecting our first child." Elsa's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Caleb." "Craven and Flint came to the house. They said they wanted to talk, to make a deal. Like a fool, I let them in. They weren't there to talk. They had 4 other men with them. They held me down. They made me watch." His voice broke. He turned away, slamming his fist against the rock wall. "They made me watch, as Flint, as he hit Sarah. And then Craven." Craven laughed. "He told me this is what happens to men who stand in the way of progress. He took a lantern from the mantle. He didn't just set the fire, Eliza. He poured the oil on the curtains, on the cradle we'd built, and on me." Caleb's voice was a raw wound. The last thing I heard was Sarah screaming. The last thing I saw was Craven's face, smiling in the flames. He and Flint left us to burn. Eliza was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how I got out," he whispered. "The floor gave way. I fell into the root cellar. The smoke, but the flames were above me. I was trapped. I could hear the house collapsing. I could hear her." He was quiet for a long time. I was in that hole for 2 days. When I finally dug myself out, I was this. He gestured to his face. The world thought I was dead. The marshal on Craven's payroll signed the death certificate, said the bones were me and Sarah. I crawled into these mountains. I lived like an animal, an Apache elder, A man named Tarza found me. His own family had been wiped out by soldiers. He saw a fellow ghost. He treated my burns. He taught me how to move without being seen, how to use the shadows, how to be the ghost they all thought I was. For 5 years, he said, his voice hardening, I've watched Craven. I learned his routines, his weaknesses, his finances. I wasn't just planning to kill him. That's too fast. I'm dismantling his life, just like he dismantled mine. I'm the rot in his wood, the drought in his river. I am the karmic debt, and I'm here to collect. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Now you know. Flint is here to hunt me, to kill the ghost. And now he has bait. You. Eliza wiped her tears, her sadness hardening into a cold, sharp anger she'd never felt before. This wasn't just about a dam or a store. It was about pure, unadulterated evil. You said the money was to get me out, she said. Yes. Take it. Ride east. Don't stop until you hit Santa Fe. No. Eliza, be reasonable. This isn't your fight. He made it my fight when he threatened me. He made it my fight when he destroyed my mother's memory. And you made it my fight when you saved me. She took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm not running, Caleb. I'm not leaving my home. And I'm not leaving you to do this alone. What are you going to do? Hit him with a skillet? He asked, the sarcasm sharp. I'm going to be your eyes, she said, her voice ringing with conviction in the small cave. You're a ghost. You can't walk down Main Street. You don't know what's happening in the saloon or the bank. I can. I'm invisible in a different way. I'm just a woman, a shopkeeper. No one sees me. Craven Flint. They'll talk right in front of me. Caleb stared at her. He saw the iron in her spine. She wasn't the frightened girl who had stumbled into his cave. It's too dangerous, he argued, but his voice had less conviction. It's more dangerous to do nothing, she countered. You can't let him win. We can't let him win. You saved my life. You saved my store. Let me help you save the town. He looked at her for a long time, the storm raging outside a mirror of the one inside him. He was a man who had survived on vengeance, fueled by a singular dark purpose. He had allowed no one in. To let her in was a risk he hadn't calculated. It meant he had something to lose again. If I let you help, he said slowly, you do exactly what I say. You don't take risks. You're my eyes, nothing more. The moment I say, run, you run. Do you understand? I understand. When the storm breaks, I'll take you back to the edge of town. There's a hollow oak tree a mile north of the main road. We'll use it as a dead drop. You leave messages there. Don't ever come here again. Agreed, Eliza said. He nodded, the pact sealed. He turned back to the cave entrance. Get some rest. Your ankle needs it. I'll be back before dawn. He stepped out into the blizzard and was swallowed by the white curtain, vanishing as if he'd never been there at all. Eliza limped to the pile of blankets, her mind racing. She lay down, pulling a heavy wool blanket over her. It smelled of wood smoke, leather, and him. She was terrified, but for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel alone. The storm broke on the third morning. Caleb returned as silently as he had left, a phantom, emerging from the dawn mist. He carried a brace of rabbits, which he prepared and cooked with a hunter's efficient grace. They ate in silence, the unspoken tension of their new alliance hanging heavy in the air. His shoulder, she noted, was healing. The graze was already scabbing over. He in turn inspected her ankle. The swelling is down, he stated, his voice professional, but you must stay off it. Use the cane your father kept behind the counter. Eliza was startled. You know about that. I know everything about that town, he said, not unkindly. I know Hemlock the blacksmith is saving money to send his boy back east. I know the sheriff, Mayor Harrison, got his job because his wife is Craven's cousin. And I know your father. I knew your father. He was a good man. He hated Craven. Eliza felt a small surge of pride. He did. Caleb's expression didn't change. Craven squeezes everyone. You're the last piece of the main street he doesn't own. He wants it. Be careful. He took her back as promised, not on his horse, but leading her on Bess, taking a winding, hidden game trail that avoided all the main roads. He left her at the edge of the foothills, just as the sun was rising high enough to burn off the last of the clouds. The oak tree, he said, pointing to a gnarled, ancient tree a mile distant. Under the largest root that faces west. Only go at dusk, and only if you have information. Don't be seen. I won't. He met her gaze, his blue eyes searching. Be safe, Eliza. He touched the brim of his hat, turned and melted back into the wilderness. Eliza rode back to town, her mind a whirlwind. She stabled Bess, limped into the mercantile, and found her father's hickory cane. The town was coming back to life after the storm, and the first place people came was the store. And they talked. They talked of the strange, sudden blizzard, and they talked of Craven. He's furious, Hemlock told her, buying a box of nails he didn't really need. The storm spooked a herd of his prime beef, scattered 'em from here to the border. But that's not the half of it. What do you mean? Eliza asked, leaning on the counter. That new man Flint, he's been asking questions about you. Eliza's blood ran cold. Me? Aye. Asked me how long you'd lived here, who your friends were. If you were reliable. I told him you were your father's daughter, and that was that. But he's sniffing around, Eliza. Watch your back. Later that day, Marcus Flint himself entered the store. He was the opposite of Craven. Where Craven was large and booming, Flint was of average height, whip-thin, and dressed in a simple, practical suit. He looked more like a clerk than a killer, except for his eyes. His eyes were flat grey and devoid of any light. He didn't browse. He walked directly to the counter. Miss Vance, he said. His voice was quiet with a faint eastern accent. A bad storm. It was, Eliza said, her heart pounding. Can I help you? I'm looking for information. He placed a coin on the counter and pushed it toward her. I'm told you hear things in this store. I sell hardware, Mr. Flint, not gossip. He smiled, a reptilian twitch of the lips. Of course, I'm looking for a man. A squatter, perhaps. Lives in the hills. Have you had any unusual customers? Anyone buying supplies that seem out of place? Large amounts of jerky ammunition, medical supplies. The only unusual thing lately, Mr. Flint, is the lack of customers. Mr. Craven's dam has seen to that. Flint's eyes sharpened. You're a bold woman. Your father wasn't so bold. I'm not my father, she said. No. Flint agreed, his gaze unwavering. You're not. He picked up his coin. If you do hear anything about a ghost, I pay well for information. Far better than a phantom, I imagine. He turned and left. Eliza had to grip the counter to keep her knees from buckling. He knew. He didn't know, but he suspected. He was baiting her. She had to warn Caleb, but she had more than a warning. That afternoon, 2 of Craven's men were in the saloon, drinking heavily, celebrating their survival of the storm. Eliza had gone to the saloon side door to deliver a case of sarsaparilla to the owner. She'd slipped in the back, and she'd overheard them. Coming on Tuesday, one of them slurred. The big one, a private Wells Fargo wagon, not even a stagecoach. All gold bullion. Mr. Craven's buying out the Pima County mineral rights. Stopping here overnight in the bank vault. Why not just go straight through? The other asked. Security. Flint's idea. The wagon comes in, looks like a regular supply run. They unload the hardware into the vault. Then at dawn they transfer it to Craven's own armored wagon. Flint and a dozen men will guard it. This was it. The reason for Flint's presence. Not just to hunt Caleb, but to protect Craven's single biggest investment. That evening, just as the sun bled red light across the horizon, Eliza tucked a small folded note into her dress pocket. She told no one she was leaving, just slipped out the back. She didn't ride Bess. She walked using the cane, following a dry creek bed that shielded her from view. It took her almost an hour. Her ankle throbbed. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. When she finally reached the ancient oak, she was breathing heavily. She knelt, found the root facing west, and felt underneath it. Her fingers brushed against a small, hollowed-out space. It was empty. She pulled out her note. Wells Fargo. Gold. Tuesday. Overnight in bank vault. Flint guarding. Heavy security. Be careful. She tucked it inside, covered the spot with loose dirt and leaves, and made her way back, her heart hammering. She didn't see the man watching from the ridge. Marcus Flint didn't use his eyes. He used his brain. He'd watched her. He'd seen her nervous energy. He'd seen her lock up the shop an hour before dusk. He hadn't followed her. That was for amateurs. He'd simply ridden to the highest point, overlooking the town, and waited. He'd watched her small figure limp toward the foothills. He didn't go to the tree. Not yet. He smiled his thin smile. The ghost had a friend, and friends had attachments, and attachments were leverage. 2 nights later on Monday, Eliza was woken by a sound, not a creak but a change in the air, a low resonant boom that she felt more than heard. It came from the north, from the direction of the river. She rushed to her window. She saw nothing, but an hour later she heard it. A low, steady roar. She ran downstairs and outside. Old Man Hemlock was already in the street, staring north. "What is it?" she asked. "The river," he whispered, his voice full of awe. "Listen." It was the sound of running water. By dawn, the whole town was at the creek bed. The muddy trickle was gone. In its place, a rushing, healthy stream of water was flowing, gurgling over the rocks, filling the dry pools. Caleb hadn't gone for the gold. He'd gone for the water. A fast-riding scout from Craven's ranch galloped into town, his horse lathered. He screamed for the sheriff. "It's the dam, the main dam. It's gone." "Gone?" the sheriff asked, pulling on his boots. "Blown to bits, someone used dynamite. A clean, perfect blast. It didn't just break the dam, it redirected the flow. It's back in the old creek bed. It's flowing to the town." Caleb had used the information. While Flint and every able-bodied man Craven employed were preparing to guard a vault full of gold, Caleb had struck at the source of Craven's power, the water. He hadn't stolen the money. He'd given the town back its life. Eliza smiled a real, genuine smile, but her smile faded when she saw Marcus Flint ride into town, his face a mask of cold fury. He wasn't looking at the cheering townspeople. He was looking straight at her store. He knew this was a diversion. He knew the information had come from her. The alliance was formed, and it had just been discovered. The water was a miracle. It was life. For the first time in years, the people of Prosperity Creek had hope. They filled barrels, watered their horses, and spoke of planting gardens. The mood was defiant. Craven had been wounded, and the town felt it. But for Eliza, the victory was hollow. It was tainted with a cold, creeping dread. Flint's stare had been a declaration. The game had changed. He didn't arrest her. He didn't confront her. He did something far worse. He began to watch. He didn't sit in a buggy outside like Craven. He was subtle. He'd be at the saloon drinking a sarsaparilla when she went to the bank. He'd be in the blacksmith shop, inspecting a horseshoe when she swept her boardwalk. He was a shadow, always there, always silent. He was hunting her, and he wanted her to know it. He wanted her to make a mistake. He wanted her to lead him to the ghost. Eliza felt like a mouse in a room with a sleeping snake. She couldn't risk going to the dead drop. She had to assume Flint was watching it, or had it trapped. She was cut off from Caleb. She prayed he was smart enough to know that, to stay away. Craven, meantime, was bleeding money. The loss of the dam was catastrophic. His vast herds were now competing for the same water as the town. He was paying exorbitant prices to have water freighted in. He was in his office at the bank, a fortress of mahogany and rage all day and all night. Desperate, Eliza tried to find a new way to communicate. She thought about a signal, a lantern in the window. But Flint was too smart for that. He'd see it. She was trapped. And then the trap tightened. She was cleaning out her father's old roll-top desk, a place she hadn't touched since his death. She was looking for old deeds, for anything that might give her leverage. In the back of a deep drawer, her fingers brushed against a small, leather-bound book. It wasn't a store ledger. It was a private journal. Her father's handwriting filled the pages. At first it was normal, notes about the weather store inventory. But then it changed. The entries became shorter, more frantic. October 14th, 1878. Craven was in again. He knows about the problem. He says he can make it go away, in exchange for a favor. Eliza's blood chilled. What problem, she kept reading. October 20th, 1878. I can't. I told him I can't. It's not right. Shaw is a good man. He's always been fair to me. Craven just smiled. He said, everyone has a price, Vance, or a secret. October 22nd, 1878. He knows. God help me, he knows. He found out about the discrepancy in the Pima County land grants. He knows I forged the signature. It was years ago. I needed the money. For Eliza's mother. For the medicine. Eliza felt sick. Her father, a forger. She read on her hands, trembling. November 5th, 1878. The plan is set. Craven wants me to give the wrong information. Marshal Bates is in on it. They're going to burn Shaw out. They just need time. They need the marshal to be late. November 7th, 1878. I did it. I gave Marshal Bates the flawed map, the one that sends him on a 10-mile detour. Craven gave me the map himself. He said no one would get hurt. Just a fire. To scare Shaw off, he promised. November 9th, 1878. Oh God, no. The fire. The news. Shaw. And his wife? Sarah. They're dead. Dead. Murdered. I'm a murderer. My map did it. I helped him. He promised no one would be hurt. He lied. The last entries were illegible, just drunken scrawls of guilt and self-loathing. Eliza dropped the book as if it were on fire. The man she had idolized, the good, honest man Caleb had spoken of, had been a coward, a forger, a accomplice to murder. Her father's weakness had been the key. Craven hadn't just used brute force. He'd used her father's secret to ensure that no one, not even the law, would come to Caleb's rescue. The weight of it crushed her. The guilt was suffocating. This wasn't just her fight. This was her inheritance. Her father's sin was a debt she now had to pay. She wasn't just helping Caleb, she was atoning. At that moment, the bell on the mercantile door jangled. Marcus Flint stepped inside. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice as flat as ever. "You look unwell. Look, it's just a headache." Eliza stammered, trying to hide the journal. "Is it?" He walked slowly toward her. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the desk. Old furniture. It holds so many secrets. He stopped standing directly across the counter from her. I went for a walk this morning, up near the foothills. I found a rather interesting tree, an old oak. Eliza's heart stopped. It had a hole, a perfect little hiding spot, and inside, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out her note, the one about the Wells Fargo shipment. He unfolded it and placed it on the counter between them. "You've been a very busy woman, Miss Vance. You and your ghost." I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. "Don't," he said, and for the first time, a flicker of irritation crossed his face. "I dislike games. I have your note. I know you're his informant. Now you have two choices." He leaned in his grey eyes, pinning her. "Choice one, you tell me where he is. You lead me to his sanctuary. You do that, and I will personally guarantee your safety. Mr. Craven will even forgive your complicity. You can keep this store. And choice two," she asked, her voice barely audible. "Choice two," Flint said, "is that I arrest you for conspiracy, for aiding a known saboteur and murderer. You will be taken to the territorial prison in Yuma. I am told. It is not a place for a woman like you. You will not last a month. And your friend the ghost will be hunted down and killed anyway. He was right. He had her. She was trapped." She looked at the note. She looked at Flint. And she thought of the journal in her hand. She thought of her father's shame, and Caleb's pain, and Sarah's murder. What do you want me to do?" She asked, the words tasting like ash. Flint's thin smile returned. "That's better. Tonight, at moonrise, you will ride to him. You will tell him. You will tell him you have new information, something vital, something that he must act on. You will lead him to the old mission, the one at Silver Creek. You will tell him Craven is meeting a new investor there alone." It's a trap," she said. "Yes," Flint said, as if explaining to a child. "I will be there, with 10 men. He won't stand a chance. He will be taken. And you will be free. Your father's good name will remain intact." The mention of her father was like a knife twist. He knew. He must know about her father's secret, too. Craven had probably told him. It was the leverage he held over the entire town. "If I don't, Yuma on the morning coach." He checked his pocket watch. "You have until moonrise to decide, Miss Vance. I do hope you make the sensible choice." He turned and walked out of the store, leaving the note on the counter. Eliza sank into her father's chair, the journal in her lap, her betrayal note on the desk. She was going to have to choose. Betray the man who had saved her, or be destroyed by the man who had murdered his wife. But as she sat there, a third, desperate, impossible idea began to form. Flint was a hunter. He was smart. But he thought she was a simple, frightened shopkeeper. He thought he had her boxed in. He didn't know about the journal. He didn't know the depth of her guilt. And he didn't know that she was no longer a mouse. She was the bait. And sometimes the bait has a trap of its own. She picked up the note. She would go to Caleb. But she wouldn't be leading him into a trap. She'd be leading him to a reckoning, risking everything. Eliza rode straight into the dragoons, screaming for Caleb. He ambushed her furious. She might have led Flint to him. She quickly explained Flint had found their dead drop and was now using her as bait, forcing her to lure Caleb into a trap at the old Silver Creek mission. To prove her loyalty and seek atonement, Eliza gave Caleb her father's hidden journal. It was a confession Craven had blackmailed her father into faking a map for the marshal, ensuring no one would come to the ranch in time. Seeing her shared burden, Caleb turned the tables. At the mission, Eliza acted as the terrified bait, while Caleb, moving like a ghost, silently ambushed and disarmed Flint's hidden men. The standoff came down to Flint in the bell tower and Caleb below. Flint, in a final act of cruelty, delivered a devastating truth: Sarah hadn't died in the fire. She'd escaped only for Craven to personally strangle her on the road. As the horrified Caleb froze, Flint took aim, but a single shot cracked from the ridge. Eliza had shot Flint dead. The hunt was over, but the revelation about Sarah's true fate left Caleb utterly broken. The ghost of vengeance died at the mission. Caleb Shaw, the man, rode from the ruins. His singular purpose was gone, replaced by a cold, clear need for justice. He and Eliza would no longer hide in the shadows. They would bring the truth to the light. They rode into Prosperity Creek in broad daylight. Eliza walked into the saloon first, the townspeople gathering behind her, and threw her father's journal at Bartholomew Craven's feet, a confession of his blackmail. Then Caleb Shaw entered a living man, not a phantom. He presented his own ledger, proving Craven's fraud. In a voice of ice, Caleb told the stunned room how Craven hadn't just burned his ranch. He had personally strangled Sarah Shaw. Exposed and rabid, Craven seized Eliza, holding a derringer to her head. But Caleb, unflinching, called his bluff. Craven's nerve broke. He shoved Eliza and bolted for the back alley. A single rifle shot echoed. Old Man Hemlock stood at the alley's end, his rifle smoking. The tyrant was dead. In the stunned silence, Caleb's life's dark purpose was over, leaving him hollow. Eliza saw the lost man beneath the scars. She knelt, taking his hands. "They called you a ghost," she whispered, "but you're real. You're real enough for me." He leaned into her touch, free. And so the legend of the Wraith died, and the life of Caleb Shaw began anew. He never rebuilt the Running Sea Ranch. Instead, he and Eliza rebuilt the town. The scars on his face remained a map of his past, but they were no longer a mask to hide behind. They were a testament to his survival. And Eliza, who had seen the man behind the ghost, had atoned for her father's sins, not with guilt, but with courage. Prosperity Creek lived its water, flowing freely, its people finally in charge of their own destiny, all because one woman was brave enough to touch the scars of a broken man and remind him that he was real. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were moved by the journey of Caleb and Eliza, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who loves a tale of justice, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We have so many more stories of the West of drama and of survival, and we can't wait to share them with you. Click subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter.